Good evening and welcome to the Gloucester Writer Center. I'm very happy to have Janice Josephine Carney and Mark Levy here tonight. I think it's sort of fitting as I was driving to the supermarket today to see the wall that heals being set up, and having this event tonight is seems sort of like we've culminated, not meaning to, but like we're aware of something going on. Growing up in Gloucester, I was always a little bit touched by how the Vietnam Veteran Memorial was in the shadows of the Gloucester High School while the other war memorials were standing proudly throughout the city, and it sort of influenced my ideas about the war and about its veterans. So I'm happy to have two Vietnam vets here reading tonight, and I think it's very important that we do. Janice Josephine Carney served in Vietnam as John Joseph Carney, her birth name and gender. She published this most recent book, One Heart and One Mind, under J.J. Carney to keep confusion down to a minimum. She lives in Beverly and volunteers at the JPVA hospital, facilitating a group for transgender veterans. Her story can also be heard on the Moth website. She has a story, Becoming My Mother's Daughter, which is an incredible story about her becoming who she is and has been. So it's a very touching story, and I recommend you all go and listen to it when you get the chance. I'm very happy to introduce Janice Josephine Carney.
I wrote a book called Purple Hearts and Silver Stars that dealt a lot with my transition and gender issues. About 10 years ago, it copies at the back. But many years ago, I was in a group of Vietnam veterans in Boston called the Veterans Improvement Program. And my main doctor was Dr. Jonathan Shea, who wrote a book called Killers in Vietnam. And he kept on pressuring me to write a book about my experiences. And I ended up writing a lot of short stories dealing with the different trauma. And I had an old Radio Shack word processor that I had it written on, and it never got published. And several years ago, my daughter found the word processor thing in a paper copy of the book in a garage in New Hampshire. And she really pushed me to have it edited. And so I had the original version, and I had it edited a little bit, and this is pretty much how I remember my year in Vietnam, and written at that time. I'm going to be two or three short pieces, so somebody's going to have to rope me in if I go beyond. Yeah. But one of the things I'm going to read first, then I'll see if what time I have left is, I wrote a poem called My First Year, the day I arrived in Vietnam, and the day I left Vietnam, which is the beginning and the ending of the book. And I might just leave it at that, and if you want to read the middle, it's up to you. So, the day I arrived in Vietnam, July 14, 1970, was the day I arrived in Vietnam. I was so scared. I was so young. A bus from the Presidio of San Francisco to the Oakland airport. A quiet, nervous flight to our first layover in Hawaii. A plane load of young boys hoarded into a lounge. Underage, yet we were allowed to drink. Military police block every door. No last chance to desert, to say never mind, or to disappear into the Hawaii beaches. The last layover, Okinawa, no alcohol allowed. Just dust, heat, and soda machines, nowhere to run or hide. An hour later, we are back on board, then circling Tonson Airport. A plane load of scared young men, more boy than men. As we circle the airport, the captain says, "Welcome to Vietnam. Enjoy your stay." We do not appreciate the humor. The captain continues, once we land, head as fast as you can into the terminal. We will unload and reload rather rapidly. We raced to the old terminal built by the French in the 1920s. We claim our duffel bags and are boarded onto buses. So young, so scared, all playing the tough guy. The bus has mashed metal screen over the windows. We learn quickly as to protect us from the rocks tossed by the local children. We passed a pile of dead Viet Cong in black PJs. Welcome to Saigon, welcome to Vietnam. We were so scared, we were so young. We are once again quickly unloaded off the buses. In the morning, we will receive our duty assignments based on our military occupational training. We are given a cot, a pillow, sheets, a hot meal of sorts. The assignment center is like an old western town. Wooden sidewalks over the mud. Wooden buildings with tin roofs, bags of sand keep the tin roofs on. I cling to the only person I know. We had hung out at the Presidio playing 8-ball for drinks. He declares that from now on his name is Jesse James. I laugh and say, well, that makes me Billy the Kid. We are in search of some of that famous Vietnamese marijuana we have heard so much about. We do not find any. Exhausted, we go back to our cots and a restless night's sleep. We were so scared, we were so young. July 15th, 1971. My last day in Vietnam. I was fearless. Nothing could kill me. I was so old that last day in Vietnam. I was driven south to Cam Ranh Air Base from Quang Tri Province, where I had spent the last year. I felt naked without my M16, my bandolier and hand grenades. I was fearless. I was so old that last day. Heading south on Highway 1. No sniper could touch me, no landmine could touch me. I arrived in Cam Ranh Bay totally stoned. I presented my end of tour orders, my ticket back to the world. Step 1, donate a cup of tea. No one leaves Vietnam with drugs in their system. I realized that I should not have smoked that Newport packed with heroin. My last night in Vietnam. I was fearless. I was so old, and nothing mattered. Drinking coffee, throwing up for a day or two. Did another pee test. I was on my way. I was on the tarmac in filthy jungle fatigues, packed with mud. Tiger Airlines, my freedom bird. 2 MPs, a body search. No one leaves Vietnam with drugs, one of the MPs asked. What is that chain around your neck? He pulls an AK-47 round. He calls it contraband and says that I cannot leave with it. I tell him that I have a personal connection to it. It came out of a jammed AK-47 that saved my life. You don't need it anymore, he says. He says, nice story, but you have a chance of handing it over, or we watch your freedom bird leave without you. As we discussed the matter. I was so fearless. I was so old. I just wanted to go home. I said, it means nothing. I handed it over. The plane lifts off in an eerie silence. We are fearless. Nothing can kill us. We are so old now. I spent the last 48 hours looking for Jesse. I did not find him. I cannot get him out of my head. I do not even know what his real name is. We landed in Alaska for a layover. Most of us are old, but still not old enough. No alcohol allowed at the airport. Back on board, heading for Seattle, Tacoma, there's more chatter now as we share our dreams of home and peace. For a moment, we are young once again, in the safety of the in the safety of the night's darkness. We are hoarded off the plane into buses, taking to Fort Lewis, a steak dinner. The fastest tailors on the face of earth are working 24 hours a day. In the morning, we all have perfect fitting dress greens, complete with battle ribbons and a combat patch, a hot shower, and a real bed. Though sleep is impossible, it's too quiet. In the morning, we are sharp in our new dress greens, a chest full of battle ribbons. We are fearless, we are old. Our tickets for our flights home in hand. One last word of advice from the old top sergeant. We advise you to travel in civvies. Wearing your uniform might cause a disturbance at the airport. I am fearless. I am old. I am going to fly back to Boston wearing my dress greens. I am Billy the Kid. In the middle is, I don't know if you want to read another piece, or you really? Well, I have one piece about how. I think. My job in Vietnam, actually, I was a battalion mail clerk with the 39th Transportation Battalion, which would support 101st Airborne. And I enlisted in the military to be a medic. With the Fort Sam Houston, I had my medical training. And thought I was going to be a medic in Vietnam, but they didn't need medics, and so I got assigned as a truck driver. They realized I couldn't drive, and panicked a little bit, and I ended up as a battalion mail clerk. And I hope I can get through all this. How I became the battalion mail clerk. The last part of the flight to Vietnam was from Okinawa, direct to Ton Son Airport outside of Saigon. The realization that we were in Vietnam hit all of us hard. I was out of high school less than a year, descending fast as hell to a world I had watched on the news all through my last 2 years of high school. We all rushed from the plane into an overcrowded, anxious terminal. Then just as quickly, we were placed on buses and taken to our temporary housing, to a await assignment, to a unit. From that first day, I had a sense that something wasn't right. I wondered why all the bus windows were protected by steel mesh. It made me feel more like a prisoner than a soldier. I was told that it was to protect us from the rocks that the locals had a habit of throwing at the buses. My thought at the time was, if they don't want us here, what the hell are we doing here? The compound where we arrived reminded me of the old western towns I had seen in the movies as a kid. A face I recognized from the airplane agreed with me. He introduced himself as Jesse James. I laughed and informed him that I was Billy the Kid. The name stuck throughout our short stay in a compound. I never did get Jesse's real name, nor saw him again. I hope he made it back to the world in one piece. After the welcome to Vietnam bullshit and assorted tips on how to survive your tour in Vietnam, I got the last good night's sleep I had for a long time. At roll call the next morning, I was informed I was part of a group assigned to the 26th Logistic Division out of Da Nang. As names were called, there was a rush to the map to see exactly where Da Nang was. The popular consensus was that it was halfway to the DMZ, so it can't be all that bad. At a smaller compound in Da Nang, we went through the same welcomes and lectures again. Another lousy meal, another night's sleep, and one more roll call for assignments. At this point, I look back at the training of the Department of the Army gave me in preparation for my mission in the Republic of Vietnam. I would like to also point out the fact that I grew up in a city where I used public transportation to get around. I had never driven a car in my short, sweet life. The Army put me through basic infantry training, field medical school, and clerk typist school. Nowhere was there a driving lesson. The staff sergeant giving out the assignments, was flying along. He simply matched MOSs, the job the Army trained you for, with units that needed the skill. The concept made sense until it came to me. I was assigned to the 666 Transportation Company as a truck driver. I quickly slowed down the process. I informed the man that he had just made a mistake. I went over to my 201 file noting the following. I was trained in basic infantry at Fort Dix, medical training at Sam Houston, and the art of typing and filing at Fort Polk. Nowhere did I ever drive a truck. Within a moment's hesitation, a good sergeant reached behind his back to his collection of Army regulations and cited one. It said all 71B clerk typists can drive a 1/4 and a 3/4 ton motor vehicle. I was told that I could take that fact that I'd never driven a car before up with my new first sergeant. The staff sergeant yelled out, "Next!" Once again, I raced to the map to find out where my assignment was. The 666 Transportation Company was part of the 39th Transportation Battalion at Camp Eagle, the home of the 101st Airborne. I guess it could have been worse. I could have been sent further north to Quang Tri. The trip to the Fubai Airport outside of Camp Eagle was somewhat scary. As I sat bouncing around in the net seats, listening to the hum of the propellers, and trying my best not to throw up, I had one thought. Can I say that word? I'll say it. What the fuck am I doing on an airplane designed for jumping and heading for Camp Eagle? We made it to Fubai in one piece. Our small group was directed to a small waiting area and told to hang tight. Someone will come along to claim you. It wasn't long before a truck pulled up and its driver shouted, "All aboard for Camp Eagle." We tossed our shit into the back of the truck, and again, the last part of our journey, to begin the last part of it, America already seemed long ago. We had been in country for less than a week. As we drove to the outskirts of Fubai, the sight of a pile of bodies clad in black pajamas was my second taste of the war. As we closed in on Camp Eagle, the driver yelled out, "Are any of you guys new drivers for 666? He seemed happy to get a few yo's. He didn't kindly inform us that due to a lot of ambushes on the night convoys lately, the unit was in desperate need of new drivers. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach that the first sergeant was not going to be very happy when he found out that one of his new truck drivers had never driven anything in his life. Camp Eagle was this large base which gave me a sense of security. My main concern was meeting the first sergeant. I will never forget my first meeting with Top. I was a 20-year-old kid, less than a year out of high school, and scared shitless. "What the fuck do you mean you don't know how to drive?" He gave no welcome to Vietnam speech. He just leapt out from behind his desk yelling, "What the fuck is this?" He ripped the beaded necklace from my neck. "When was the last time you shined your boots and had a haircut?" he went on. "But bright and early tomorrow, you will be in front of this office with shined boots, a haircut, and you will learn how to drive a deuce and a half." Before I had a chance to say anything, he turned and screamed to his desk clerk, "Get this fuck up out of my sight." I was in shock. Here I was in Vietnam. I had a whacked out first sergeant who thought he was a drill sergeant, and we were still in basic training. The company clerk took me to my living quarters, a small hooch with 4 cots, 3 rednecks, and a rail-to-rail stair view with hours and hours of good old country music. It was a heaven if you like good old-fashioned country music. Hell if you hated it, old forms of country music. The company clerk told me not to worry about it. Top treated everyone like shit. He gave me some downers, told me to have a few beers and relax. I got real relaxed. Threw up and passed out. Morning came fast. George Jones was still singing. and my roommates were drinking their breakfast. Someone yelled at me, "Get my shit together," and that Top was looking for me. As I got up, somewhat of a daze, I heard the sound of crunching glass. As I reached down to pick up my smashed glasses, I got quite a laugh. Top was with the motor pool sergeant planning my day when I found him. I informed him that I could not see very well without my glasses. The first sergeant calmly asked, where the fuck are your glasses? After showing him my broken glasses, I didn't get a word in. Do you know how long it would take to get them fixed? All I heard after that was, get him the fuck away from me. The company clerk took me back to Hillbilly Heaven and said, don't worry, Top will have a couple of shots of whiskey and settle down. That was Friday, and the first sergeant left me hanging to the weekend. Monday morning, the company clerk came by and told me Top had called battalion headquarters and given them hell. He told me that I had been transferred to headquarters company to fill a clerk job. As he turned around to leave, he looked back with a smile and asked, did you break your glasses on purpose, or did you have a lucky day? I smiled and said nothing. By this time, I could not get anyone to believe that it was an accident. I was just happy that I was spending my last night with the 666 Trans Company. I decided to spend that night enjoying a quiet movie. The movie was shown on a wooden screen down at the bottom of the hill. The theater had wooden benches going up the side of the hill. The projector was at the top of the hill in the NCO club. The movie hadn't been running very long when a loud explosion made me jump off the bench. I looked up to see half the crowd was calmly sitting watching the movie, while the other half was looking up the hill and cheering. I asked the obvious question, what the fuck was that? The guy sitting next to me said, oh, that's Top's hooch. I hope they got the bastard this time. The next morning, I woke up and was told to pack. My stay at the 666 Transportation Company was at an end. I was to report to headquarters company. As I was being driven to my new assignment, I asked my driver how the first sergeant was doing. I was told the bastard was still alive. I reported to my new job as S3 clerk with a sense of false security. I was beginning to believe that I was going to spend the war typing and filing away. This wonderful job lasted about a week. I was filling new regulations when I heard the warrant officer in charge screaming, who's reading this communist literature? He was holding my copy of the Rolling Stone. In a bad choice of words, I said, that's my personal property, put it the fuck down. So much for that job. It didn't take them long to find me a job no one was kicking down doors to get. Someone pointed out that the battalion mail clerk was rotating in 2 weeks, so I found a job I could handle. The following stories are based on what I saw and felt during my years as battalion mail clerk. Yeah. Thank you.
It's with great pleasure that I am going to introduce Mark Levy. Here is the third verse from one of many love songs on the album Trouble by Ray LaMontagne. So now we see how it is. This fist begets the spear, weapons of war, symptoms of madness. Don't let your eyes refuse to see. Don't let your ears refuse to hear, or you ain't never going to shake this sense of sadness. These lines represent one way to think about the effects of war on men and women in the military and on civilians as well. Speaking, writing, composing, filmmaking, the expressive arts can be a source of renewal, acute awareness, an antidote to despair. The tradition of telling stories and writing poems about war is very old and continues vigorously with every collection of poems, every novel, every memoir, film, and installation. Mark Levy's website, Medic in the Green Time, displays reproductions of ancient Greek paintings of warriors on the opening page. And I wanted to point out these anthologies of war poetry published from both World War I and World War II, include men and women of various experiences. This one is her war story from the 20th century women writing about war. These books provide us with valuable and illuminating histories of the times. These writers and their insistence on grappling with the realities of war. This book, Writing Between the Lines, an anthology on war and its social consequences, was one of the early collections of writings from the Vietnam War, edited by Kevin Bowen and Bruce Weigel, two Vietnam combat veterans, published in 1997, 20 years after the end of the Vietnam War. As the editors point out, is that what sets this group of writers apart is their emergence not as victims, but as survivors, who through their art exemplify what's enduring, resilient, and moral within the human spirit. And this anthology includes Vietnamese poets as well as American poets. Kevin Bowen and Bruce Weigel, revered poets, and others associated with the founding of the Joyner Institute summer writing workshops, have been committed to helping disseminate the writings of Vietnamese poets and translations of their work. And Mark Levy has also participated in these workshops, who has also participated in these workshops since their early years. Among his many published writings is a two-part interview with Vietnamese writer Bao Ninh, the critically acclaimed author of The Sorrow of War. With the help of a translator, Mark conducted a 3-hour interview with Bao Ninh in 1998, a visiting writer at the Joyner Institute. After many questions and answers and deeply focused listening by both men while recording, Bao Ninh offered a final comment to Mark. With the help of a translator, he said, "The North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, were not robots. We were human beings. That is what you must tell people. We were human beings." Writing about the wounds of war, I'm almost done, Denise Levertov quotes Marilyn McMahon, an Army nurse, writing about war. "Wounds heal from the bottom up and from outside in. Each must be kept open, must be probed and exposed to light, must be inspected and known." We will soon hear from Mark Levy, prolific writer, world traveler, and North Shore denizen, whose courageous, vivid writing is often less than soothing. In a recent poem, which you can also find on his website, is "He Would Tell You." The first 3 lines begin, "Here in the secret chambers of my darkest heart are things I will never tell." Here are the last 5 lines. "So, though I nearly did, let me never tell you things you cannot know. Let me never tell you things that won't let go." Okay. A few more words about Mark. Mark was an infantry medic with the 1st Cavalry in Vietnam and Cambodia in 1970. He received several decorations for valor. His war-related prose, poetry, and essays have been published in various print and online journals. A video of his war experiences, The Real Deal, is distributed by the Cinema Guild. He has profiled and inconvenienced stories, Vietnam War Veterans by Jeff Wolin, Silent Men Speaking, True Experience of Veterans of the War in Vietnam, written by Mark Levy and Carl Thompson, and based on an oral history by David Bianchini, Alan Gaskell, Mark Levy, and Robert Vincent. It was performed at the West End Theater.
So in this piece, it's prose. You need to know that NDP stands for Night Defensive Perimeter, which is where we set up at night in the jungle. 100 guys set up a circle, dig some foxholes, some machine gun positions, set out the trips and claymores. And half of the people go to sleep and half of them stay up on guard, and that goes on all night until it's time to start going on patrol again. And this is called the quiet time. Imagine this. After a blistering hot day marching up and down mud-slicked hills, or tramping wide open fields or steamy jungle, imagine setting out booby traps on an enemy trail, laying in wait, then ever so carefully breaking them down. At dusk, after planting trips and claymores round the NDP, after finding a spot for your pack and gear, after eating tinned sea rations of beans and franks, imagine curling up on the cold, wet ground. Now, fast asleep, being woken twice in the night by a man gently tapping your resting arm. Your guard, he whispers, for the first of 2 one-hour shifts. Leaving that foxhole the second time, grenades, machine guns, claymore detonators all in place. Imagine 2 hours sleep, rising at dawn, shrugging off bugs and wet bamboo, rubbing rheumy eyes, brushing sticky teeth. Before the grueling day begins, there is the welcoming taste of GI coffee. Here is how to make it. Seated cross-legged, take a chunk of C4 the size of a thumbnail, shape it into a ball, set it carefully down. Tear open the packet of instant coffee saved from last night's sea ration meal. Pour it into a canteen cup half filled with water. Tap the brown powder over the cup, stir with a sea ration white plastic spoon. Strike a GI match and light the C4. Do not breathe in the white smoke. The fumes, it is said, are harmful. Hold the canteen cup over the burning explosive until the water boils, about 30 seconds. Remove the cup from the bright yellow flames, let the C4 burn itself out. Those who step on it risk losing a foot. Tear open and pour in 1 or 2 packets of non-dairy creamer. Repeat with sugar. Use the white plastic spoon to mix and stir with eyes closed. Inhale the savory vapors. Cup to your lips. Feel the hot, inky brew flood your mouth. Scourge your tongue. Roll down your willing gullet. The taste is awful, but it will do. Grunts savor this quiet time before every inch of our bodies are salty with sweat. This quiet time before seething mosquitoes, snapping ants, creeping leeches bite or sting or drink our blood. This quiet time before sudden shots fill us with dread that is always new. This quiet time before the shrieking air sings of the wounded, smells of the dead. It is the all too fleeting quiet time which ends with the softly echoed 02, followed by the dim rustling of 100 packs, helmets, weapons, reluctantly lifted, slung, shifted to place. See how the flock of helmeted cranes slouch against their rifles. Feel how the sweat drips down narrow cheeks, collects at the chin, free falls, forming small dark spots on half-bent knees. Listen as moments after the hushed command, 100 grudging soldiers, one by one, reluctantly trudge forward into the grim unwinnable jaws of Vietnam. Not just one day out of 8 months. I'm at home here. I'm in a room full of travelers. So I can tell you that in 1989, with a bunch of healthcare workers, I went to Nicaragua to distribute some remedial medical supplies. And at one point, we took a bus across the country from west to east and took a boat up a river, a speedboat, to a place called Bluefields, a remote village that had been the site of some of the fighting during the Nicaragua Civil War between the Contras and the Sandinistas. To my mind, the Sandinistas were the good guys, the Contras were the American-backed bad guys. And the village had been recently hit by Hurricane Mitch, so it was still relatively devastated. So the group consisted of social workers and nurses, and mostly women and a couple of guys. And at one point in our stay at Bluefields, we ended up in a little building, in a room about this size, but thick, heavy. The wood was heavy and dank, and the ceiling was even lower than this. The shutters were made of heavy wood, so the shutters were bolted closed, the door was bolted closed, and we sat there on these old wooden benches. There was a small stage, and we waited in the heat and in the dimness, and eventually in walked 4 Contra, who we were there to listen to and then interview. And the war was mostly over, so we were relatively safe. But there was no good feelings in that village for the Contra, and I was the only Vietnam vet in the group. So this is an excerpt from a short story I wrote about that trip. The story is called Bluefields, and I've just set the scene. There are 5 Contras sitting on these little stools, and the first one is towards the end. There's an officer speaking. He's a captain. The captain says that after the fighting, he continued to live in the jungle, and each morning woke with blood in his mouth. Blood in my mouth, he repeats. The captain says the anger made him grab his weapon, lock it, load it, raise it up, walk about, look for someone to kill. But the war is over. There is no one to shoot. He's going crazy. The captain says in the jungle he found a bush doctor who mixed handfuls of long-stemmed herbs, a bush doctor who said, "Light these things, inhale the smoke, and you will be well." With his graceful hands, the captain wafts invisible smoke into his squinting eyes. He inhales the fumes, holds his breath, exhales. After 20 minutes, he puts the burning stalks down and slept 3 days straight. When he woke, he says, he was cured. The blood, it is gone, the captain says. Gone. The boy next to him unfolds his arms to reveal the silk-screened words Nantucket rectilinear stenciled across his shirt. He will not reveal his name. He tells us fireworks, firecrackers, backfiring cars, bright lights cause him to crouch, to run, to hide. He reaches behind his back, lifts the tail of his shirt, delves, brandishes a snub-nosed .38 revolver. From where I sit, I can see the tips of the bullets chambered in the rotating cylinder. I take her wherever I go, says the boy, wherever I go. The women in the group gasp, so he puts it away. I think to myself, boy, tell them more. Tell these innocent, caring gringos what it's like. Boy, tell them how you are never the same. Tell them all the rote drills, spirited hurrahs, drunken or silken hero talk. Tell them it vanishes the instant the first firefight, rocket, or mortar attack throws you down, shocks you out, barrels you into the split-second energetic world of hunting and being hunted by other human beings. Boy, speak of the rattling bullets. Speak of the white-tailed rockets. Speak of ruby-tipped flesh and ripped torsos spangled with gore. Speak of that soft, dull thud on red-stained earth. Boy, speak of the last look in the dull eyes, the light gone out. Death. Speak of its feel, its smell, its touch. Speak of the final look in the final faces. Speak of it, boy-san. Speak. Carlos, the man with sunglasses, talks as if he too has changed. He tells us how young men and women lying in wait exploded a black market claymore on his platoon. The blast tore men to pieces. It hurled them high into the air. The human whirlwinds spun like stars, fell like rain, they fell, says Carlos, mopping sweat from his brow, like rain. Carlos says the CIA flew him to Florida. Doctors took 19 steel fragments from his chest, 18 from his face. He's blind. The CIA paid for medicine that stopped his nightmares, his thoughts of killing himself. But then the gringos said, "Now you must go." He asked to stay, but they would not let him. The captain flares his elbow out, inclines his wrist, looks at his watch. "We have been here 3 hours," he says. "Perhaps we are done." The Contras and the Americans stand up. As is the custom, the room fills with the sound of our hearty applause. And then it actually goes on. So I think I have do I have time? Okay. I was living in New York for about 20 years on and off. And there were a lot of readings in New York. So at one of them I read this poem, and the host said, "I like that." Jackie Sheeler, who some of you may know, she's known as the poet of Rikers Island. That was a couple of years ago. She taught poetry there. Her father was a cop, and this was around the time of the Abner Louima killing in New York. So she put together an anthology of poems that was called Poetry by and About the Police. And there are about 100 poems by the police and just ordinary citizens. So this one I wrote, it's called Rudy Awakening, with a reference to the mayor at the time, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, in the unlikely event one of New York's finest commands, "Show me some fucking ID or I'll break your face," then hauls off, wraps a nightstick round your head, stomps your ribs, tags you with assault, please, at all costs, remain absolutely calm. Mr. Mayor, please do keep your head should 4 heavily armed undercover men peg you hell-bent on cocaine, shout nothing, shoot and shoot the gun-crazed air, arms, legs, lungs, heart. As law-abiding veteran New Yorkers, we beg you, though it defies all common sense, all logic, remain absolutely calm. Furthermore, in the impossible fate that you or yours are somehow cuffed, paddy-wagoned, booked, printed, strip-searched by overzealous men, no, do not be alarmed at mauling hands inserted deep in private places, drawing down blood. Ah, mi amigo, better cowled human hands than human fouled wood. Thus, and therefore, we, the undersigned, beg you in God's great name, remain absolutely calm. I read this at a reading, this next piece at a reading that the Iraq vets, the warrior writers, put on about 3 weeks ago at the friend's house. And there were mostly Iraq vets and Afghanistan vets in the audience. And I've read this piece before, and it's on the website, and most people get it. They just get it. But the vets didn't. They just sat there like a hung jury. They didn't know what to do. I wrote it was inspired by a homeless vet I was reading at a mic for psychiatric patients in New York. And me and this homeless guy got into it. And he just had to one-up me. He wasn't a Vietnam vet, he was just a homeless guy. Tough. He slept at Tompkins Square Park. He was intimidating, and I wasn't afraid of him. I don't know why. So one day I wrote this, responding to him. His name is Pitts. He wore one of those belts that the movers wear that keeps your guts in one place. He looked like a slightly toned-down version of Isaac Hayes, but he couldn't sing. Speak out. Anyone can say they were in Vietnam. Anyone can say I was a medic up in the boonies, did 2-3 tours, got shot at, plug guys with bandages and morphine to ease the pain. Anyone can say they were in Vietnam, but not me. I'd never do that. I'm the genuine article. I'm the real deal. I have the papers and medals to prove it. At a warehouse in Secaucus, New Jersey, surrounded by electrified chain-link fence, armed guards with 6-legged pit bulls who speak in tongues guard over my 100,000 medals of honor. On Tuesdays, I charge $3 for the radical walking tour. I've been awarded the Distinguished Service Cross so many times the Army sent me a telegram in 1978. Sir, please be advised we have run out of sheet metal and ribbon fabric. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have commissioned a team to sculpt your likeness on Mount Rushmore. Congratulations, and God bless the United States of America. The Silver Star is the third highest decoration for gallantry in combat. I keep all 2,000, one for every citizen in Dentville, Wisconsin, in 600 solid oak treasure chests. When the moon is full, I lift the lid of one such chest, sink my hands deep into the glistening pile, hurl them high with all my strength. When the tinkling stars shower down, winking, it reminds me of the Milky Way. Do not doubt me. You have my word, all this is terribly true. I was no ordinary medic during those dim days of yesteryear. No, sir. No, ma'am. I performed brain surgery in the dark, 12 men at a time without benefit of anesthetic, to obtain the element of surprise. I called in B-52 strikes using my sinus cavities to broadcast outgoing signals. I was born in a bomb crater on the 3rd of July. In my pack, I carried entire battalions of tanks and cannons. The blades of helicopters poked out from beneath my helmet, snagged on clouds, slowed me down. I fired my M16 82 trillion times. I'd never once jammed or malfunctioned. I dug 500 million foxholes. I ate 9 billion cans of sea rations. I drank 39 million gallons of water. I defecated 666 million metric tons of highly enriched government-issued poo. A not immodest sum, don't you think? Anyone can say they were in Vietnam. But I'm the real deal, the genuine article. I have the papers and medals to prove it. You meet me at 2:30 in the afternoon in Secaucus, New Jersey. I'll give you the tour. But those under 18 will not be admitted. How am I doing for time?
Good.
Okay. I want to change pace for a minute. It's not all war, Dorothy. It's about 95%. So my friend George Dickerson, a very good friend. I met him when I was in a bad place around 98. I just come back from 8 months backpacking Asia and I was pretty weirded out. So there was a poetry reading at the Sailors and Soldiers Hotel or something, home or whatever it is in New York on the Lower East, Mid-East side, Midtown East side. And I was in the audience, and a range of people read, and then this guy, George Dickerson, read, and I was mesmerized, and talked to him afterward, and we became friends. And he lived at 172 Bleecker Street in the Village, in a 2-room apartment that he was paying $600 for the last 15 years, with his wife and daughter and a dog named Lucky, a Doberman, and it was a cross between like a Doberman and an Irish Wolfhound or something. And I would go there every 2 or 3 times a month for the first year that I knew him. And one day, and I knew that he wrote, because he would talk to me about writing. And one day he asked me if I knew about his movies, and I said, no. What movies? And he said, you never saw me in Blue Velvet? And I said, no. And he said, oh. And he gave me, so I went out and I watched the movie, and George is the guy who says to the kid in the movie, who finds the human ear, yes, when he opens up the paper bag. Yes, that is a human ear. And that's his most famous movie, but he was in a dozen or 2 other movies and TV sitcoms and other stuff. And so then I got to realize he was a movie star and a great writer. He was the original founding editor of Radipalax, and published in Best American Short Stories and a slew of literary journals. A great friend. He passed away in March. So there was a reading at the Pink Pony in New York when I went to visit him about 5 years ago. I didn't have anything to read, so I asked his wife for something. She taught at the Little Red Schoolhouse in the Village, and on the spot they gave me a poem that one of her students, aged 13, 14, had written. She had kept it. She had scrawled it on, just a tear out of a little notebook. So I read that, and it was a hit because it's great writing. So I read this in memory of George. It's called, I just titled it, Poem by a Student for her teacher. You said to read a poem about something that moves me, but if I tell you that my heart is killing me, is that a poem? If I tell you that I can still hear her singing in the kitchen, is that a poem? Her voice was a book of poems to me. If I tell you that I throw up from missing her, that her dresses still smell like her, that my brother hits himself again and again, is that a poem? Listen. Before she died, her face was so beautiful. She said, "Can you hear them? Can you hear them singing?" I'm asking you, teacher, is that a poem? I think that's a great note to close on. Thank you.